can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again.
What fi go to eat no money, what fi at you, eat no at you. Covid money missing, we eat the your little rat you. Use the youth, the money, waste my bust a man to statue. Say me like a catch you, but bigger than a figure you. Take the script of money, girl, and say that it's not you. One day the man above end up in my gut up. Too much eating at the kitchen, some a fly by like a patu. When singers and DJs and social media's coming at you.
It burn me.
300% raise.
It burn me.
Garbage pile up the day.
It burn me.
Give the teacher them raise.
It burn me.
I see corruption face.
It burn me.
Mash down the people them house.
It burn me.
Every day appear arms out.
It burn me.
Appear money them a thief.
It burn me.
And them a sell out the beach.
Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. You touch up line and a resort to crime. You can't fool me again.
For me say dig up all the charities and all of the giver. Some a go like say them powerful, me no make a bigger. The already promises none of them not deliver. Cut up the youth and rap and they down in our fever. Member bold money and they lie them tell. Corruption smell and they pocket them swell. When police don't a market like Satan out of hell go mash up people start like thief when them sell.
It burn me.
Or they treat the market man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat the cat man.
It burn me.
Or they treat the peanut man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat the dirt man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat the sun man.
It burn me.
Or them a treat policeman.
It burn me.
Or them a treat soldier man.
It burn me.
How them a treat everyone.
Can't fool me again. You can't fool me again. You hold me down for a very long time. Can't buy sugar, we can't buy lime. Can't buy scallion, we can't buy time. You can't fool me again. Can't fool me again. You can't.
Good evening, my lovely viewers, and welcome. Good evening to all my globalists on TikTok and YouTube, as usual. Welcome. Thank you for joining. For the very first time this evening, we are broadcasting on the X. Sengo tell Elon Musk so we reach. But I want to ask, are we the fool? Are them are the fool? Or I take them tech with a fool? You must have heard, coming I go stay out there long tonight. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome and thank you for joining us. The Silvera twist continues to rumble and twist over and turn over. Good evening and welcome to those on the X this evening. It's our debut broadcast on X. We hear that all of the uptown and politician people hang out over X and hope of criminality and barbarity and all sort and cover up are going uptown and in the political sphere. So we come over X to come meet on over here. So good evening to those on the X this evening. And as usual, welcome and thank my globalists on TikTok and YouTube for joining. Mr. De Silva wasn't at home. So bloody what, Mr. De Silva? Okay, let's run with the story that De Silva wasn't at home. Were you shocked as us on Friday when the postmortem result became public that Mrs. Silvera had multiple gunshot wounds? Was Mr. Silvera as shocked and surprised as us when on Friday when he found out? Because if Mr. Silvera wasn't at home, And Mr. Silvera had us believe from the 11th of November until Friday that Mrs. Silvera died in her sleep. What happened when you got home, Mr. Silvera? What did you notice? If you weren't at home and Mrs. Silvera was shot, and we're yet to hear of any break-in and entry, are we now going down the road of Mrs. Silvera possibly shot herself? Will this be the next twist, Mr. Silvera and the police? Let's go back to the police. Reports are coming out that the police spent almost the whole day at the Silvera residence on the 11th. They also seized Mr. Silvera's licensed firearm. Wouldn't that suggest to us that from get-go, when that narrative was given to us on the 11th, there was an active, bloody, nasty, open crime scene at the Silvera's residence, knowingly to the police? Wouldn't it be a fair conclusion to draw that if the police spent almost the whole day at the Silvera's residence, Mr. Silvera's firearm has been confiscated or been seized for ballistic? Would that not suggest to us that the police were dealing with a crime scene from the initial stages? If that is so, isn't the cover-up wider than it is, than it appears? If that is the case, wouldn't the cover-up wider than it appears? Because both Mr. Silvera and the police have us believe all along that Mrs. Silvera died in her sleep. Never until Friday things took a nasty turn in public as to the findings from the post-mortem. The police seem to have been involved in a cover-up from the get-go. Has this all come to light because the post-mortem doctor refused to go along with the cover-up? What did Mr. Silvera do when he came home and found his wife dead? Did Mr. Silvera notice any blood? Did Mr. Silvera touch her? Did Mr. Silvera try to wake her? Was there anything odd in the room? But if we were to swallow the pill that Mr. Silvera wasn't at home, then Mr. Silvera couldn't have been culpable if he wasn't there. It is possible that she might have brought someone into the house and that person might have shot her. Why would Mr. Silvera not want the police to know that? Or why would Mr. Silvera told us she died in her sleep? If you weren't there when she died and you came home to find her dead, why would you withhold that from the public? Okay, she brings somebody in, possibly. That person kill her and get out before Mr. Silvera get there. So therefore, there would be no evidence of breaking and entry because it's possible that she brought somebody into the house willingly. But why would Mr. Silvera put the narrative out in public that his wife died in her sleep and allow the narrative to stay there until the postmortem result came out on Friday? If not so, then Mr. Silvera. Let's look at the room. If you came home to find your wife dead, a family home, Mr. Silvera, even if both you and your wife was on the brink of divorce, why would you want to get rid of the remnants of your wife from the bedroom while your wife is still in the care of the state, waiting for postmortem? Why would you want to renovate the room in your highest point of grief, Mr. Silvera? You weren't at home. You came home to find and find your wife dead. Why, while you should be preparing funeral, consoling your children, you were busy redecorating your bedroom? The bedroom you share with your wife, you was busy redecorating your bedroom while your wife's body was awaiting a postmortem. Who is the police, Mr. Fitzbailey, that went to the Silvera's residence on the 11th of November? This was where the cover-up started. At what point Mr. Golden knew this was a crime, this is a murder, there's an active open crime scene? At what point did Mark Golden know that? Did Mark Golden have insider information before the result of the postmortem? Has Mark Golden made any statement since Friday? Has the women's movement in the People's National Party addressed this issue and addressed the abuse and murder of women in our country? Or is it another, we will do everything to sweep it under the carpet? Mr. Silvera, licensed firearm, has been taken for ballistics. What if it comes back that Mr. Silvera firearm is not the firearm that killed Mrs. Silvera? Couldn't we draw the inference that enough time would have been given by the police not only to destroy evidence in the bedroom, but if an illegal firearm was involved in the crime, the police would have already given Mr. Silvera enough time to destroy critical evidence. You see how big this cover-up is? This is a cover-up by the state. This is a cover-up by the state. Is Mr. Golden going to make a speech on this issue? Is Mr. Golden going to clarify to the public the relation between Mr. Golden and Mr. Silvera? Because of recent, we've been seeing Mr. Silvera in public with Mark Golden quite frequently. Mark Golden was one of the very first to send condolences to Mr. Silvera. Now we know that Mrs. Silvera was murdered. If Mr. Silvera doesn't want to address us, it is important that Mr. Silvera, attorney, make some public clarification. If Mr. Silvera wasn't at home, was there any breaking and entry? Is there a possibility that Mrs. Silvera shot herself? Why didn't the police alert the public to an open crime scene at the Silvera's residence on the 11th of November? If the police spend the whole day at the residence, almost the whole day, if they seize Mr. Silvera's residence, firearm, why would the police want to seize Mr. Silvera's firearm if Mrs. Silvera died peacefully in her sleep? It wouldn't make sense. Or were they protecting him from bringing any potential harm to himself because of his possible or potential state of mind? It is very important to have clarity on the issue from the police as to what we're exactly dealing with. The police is giving us too much piece of hinges of information. We need clarification as to what the police knew on the 11th of November. That is very important because in my view, this was where the cover-up started. So it is important for Fitz-Bailey to clarify to the public, this is a state crime, Fitz-Bailey. This is not a civil matter. This is a crime against the state. Fitz-Bailey should clarify what the police knew on the 11th of November. It is important if they want us to have any trust in them. It is important because if they took the firearm, if they spend a huge chunk of the day there, then something was happening or something has happened for this action to take place. So an active cover-up started immediately. The police would have got there because nobody sought to correct the information prior to Friday that Mrs. Silvera was murdered. We were all left to believe for 5 weeks that she died in her sleep. Why is Mr. Silvera not arrested? Even if Mr. Silvera is being questioned, why is Mr. Silvera not arrested on suspicion of murder? Why would you be waiting for the ballistics to come back before you arrest Mr. Silvera? If this was in the ghetto or in rural Jamaica, if Mr. Silvera was from the ghetto or from rural Jamaica, would Mr. Silvera still have his freedom? If Mr. Silvera was from ghetto Jamaica or rural Jamaica, would Mr. Silvera still have his freedom? Would you be waiting on ballistics and all sort before you come to a conclusion? Have the Silvera's children been questioned? Mr. Silvera wasn't at home. Were the Silvera's children in the residence on the night of the 10th before Mr. Silvera gets home? Has any of the children been spoken to as a witness or a suspect? Because if Champagne wants us to believe that Mr. Silvera is not being treated as a suspect, then either we're fool, them think we're fool, or them really take with a fool. Because there's no break-in and entry, multiple gunshot wounds, room significantly renovated. Police take firearm for ballistics. We've been so served up a narrative for 5 weeks. Mr. Silvera wallowed in our sympathy for 5 weeks and kept very, very quiet. Even people close to me who knows Mr. Silvera or the Silvera family have been trying to reach out to Mr. Silvera since the 11th of November. And to date, Mr. Silvera hasn't even picked up the phone to accept sympathy or otherwise. But Mr. Silvera is busy renovating his bedroom while his wife's body is in the morgue awaiting postmortem. And then Peter Champagne wants us to use cushion when dealing with Mr. Silvera. Mr. Silvera doesn't deserve our sympathy. Mr. Silvera lied to us for 5 weeks. Even if Mrs. Silvera shot herself, it couldn't have been done so keen and classy and well done that Mr. Silvera came home and not realize that his wife's been shot and possibly bleeding. If Mrs. Silvera wasn't bleeding, or if there wasn't blood splash or splatter within the room, why would there be a reason for Mr. Silvera to have done significant renovation on his bedroom or on their bedroom? At what time did you get home, Mr. Silvera? And at what time did you alert the authorities that you came home to find your wife dead in her sleep? Were the children at home? Or when you came home, you were under the influence of drug or alcohol, so you may not have realized what has happened in your residence? Could it be that you were under the influence of drugs and alcohol in 2017 when you were supervising your 2-year-old who drowned in a pool in your residence? Does Mr. Silvera have a drug or alcohol problem? Is Mr. Silvera an abuser? Or was Mr. Silvera an abuser prior to the death of Mrs. Silvera? We must continue to ask a whole lot of questions about this. This is a huge cover-up involving the whole of Uptown, politician, police, and rich and famous. We must not allow them to get away with it. They must face the justice that we all poor Jamaicans face. And I want to say to Mark Golden tonight, on the issue of freedom of speech, you were very quick to distance yourself from Isaac Buchanan. This is a potential murder, Mark Golden. The longer you take to distance yourself from Mr. Silvera, we will make sure, Mr. Golden, this be a political hanging for you. The longer you stay to distance yourself from Mr. Silvera, this could be your political downfall. You will not be going into an election sucking up to a potential or an alleged murderer. Even if you all destroy the evidence and treat it like you all treat justice uptown and downtown, we may not be able to convict him to remove his freedom, but we will sure give him a public trial and a public conviction. We might not be able to sentence him or remove his freedom if you don't, but we will be sure to give him a public trial and a public conviction. Because if you, Paula Llewellyn, if you, the justice blocker, if you, who Dr. Nesbitt say is kosher with gunman, Paula Llewellyn, the director of public prosecution, if Paula Llewellyn, who as Dr. Nesbitt said, is in bed with gunmen, come back and tell us that there isn't sufficient evidence to determine who killed Mrs. Silvera in her residence, which there was no break-in and entry, then we, the public, must make sure Mr. Silvera has a public trial and a public conviction. And if Mark Golden doesn't distance himself, Mark Golden should not get away at the ballot box. If the PMP woman movement does not come out and take a stand, the woman of Jamaica should speak at the ballot box. Crime in Jamaica is our problem to solve. For too long, we've been asking the criminals of Uptown and a lawless police service, a corrupt police service, to protect us or to fight crime. Until we, the people, all come on board and start taking responsibility for our security or economy or politics and our country, we will continue to fail. Because those who are in charge of our state, country, or economy or politics have no interest in making sure that we are develop or advance, because it doesn't serve them. Even in their uptown circle, they're willing to protect powerful men who commit crime. Patrick Bailey, a man was murdered in Patrick Bailey's house. Patrick Bailey was the attorney of Andrew Holness. To date, Patrick Bailey hasn't been arrested or charged. There was no break-in and entry at the residence. The man was murdered brutally, but Patrick Bailey didn't do it. While Mr. Silvera wasn't at home when his wife was murdered, are they going to come and tell us there's no evidence that Mr. Silvera did it? If the ballistic comes back that the weapon that was used is not Mr. Silvera, wouldn't it be right to draw the conclusion that the police not only give Mr. Silvera enough time to clean up the evidence in the room, but possible to destroy an illegal firearm that was used in the crime? This was the people's point of view. Tomorrow, I have a funeral, so I'm not going to I'm not here for long. I just came out to ask those few questions. Will Fitz Bailey ever find time to do his job? Because why should we trust Fitz Bailey, really? Why should we trust Fitz Bailey, that Fitz Bailey is going to do a fair or a thorough investigation? The cover-up started with them. The cover-up started with the police. When the police entered the Silvera's residence on the 11th of November, they would have recognized that they're in an open crime scene. If Mr. Silvera has to get rid of bed, flooring, paint, and repaint. There have to be blood splatters or something that Mr. Silvera is trying to disguise, hide, or get rid of to have carried out such significant renovation. So the police, in my view, is involved in a cover-up from the get-go. We must continue to ask questions, and that Fitz-Bailey must answer our question, and that we pay them. This is a state crime. The police seem to be covering it up. We need answers. We need to know what the police knew on the 11th of November. What did Mark Golding knew on the 11th of November? If not then, at what point did Mark Golding knew from his inner circle, his People's National Party circle, his uptown circle, that this was a murder and not that Mrs. Silvera died in her sleep? At what point was Mark Golding privy to that information? And when Mark Golding is going to make a public statement? My understanding, he was the head of Mr. Golding's security, or a member of Mr. Golding's security team. At what point Mr. Golding is going to address the nation? I want to thank you very much tonight for being on the People's Point of View. I did not get the chance to do a live today. I was bogged down with a lot of admin work. I had to get a lot of admin work done today. Tomorrow I have a busy day. I have a funeral. I also have another funeral on Wednesday. So tomorrow night and Wednesday night, I don't think I'll be coming live. I'm not sure. It depends on what time I get home, but I will keep you informed. I will keep you informed. Thank you very much for being here. I will be going off to my bed now. And for those of you on the X, thank you very much. There were 7 of you here at the start. There's 1 left now, but thank you. And it's my first time on Twitter doing a video or a live, so I don't know if it's something that's stored and stay over there. I will see how it goes, but thank you all very much for being here. And I will definitely see you soon, and I will keep you updated. And thank you all very much. Thanks for the condolences. Thank you very much. And see you tomorrow. Not tomorrow. See you soon. See you soon. Good night, and thanks for joining.